morning, everyone. Lovely to be here on this very wet, grey Cape Town morning. So it's lovely to see all of you here. And welcome to the session on reputation management. I think it's quite a key topic when it comes specifically to the supply chain management side of things. So I'm very eager, anybody who wants to share with me what they would like to get from this session, or do they think when they hear reputation management, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Integrity, absolutely. Customers, absolutely. Image, definitely. Behavior, absolutely. I beg your pardon? Damage control? Absolutely. Brand value, absolutely. I'm loving these words that come out, because I think very often what comes to mind, let me just quickly, okay, so the talking points this morning, because I want to actually just jump into it. What is reputation and why you should care about it? How healthy is your reputation? What is impacting your reputation? I actually want to go through a bit of an exercise where you can actually measure or get some kind of an idea of what your reputation is, and I'd love to get your feedback on that. And then we'll have a Q&A, but please feel free to ask questions as we go along as well. So as I said, what does reputation management mean? Is it often something, and the word that did come up was damage control. I think perhaps I just want to take a step back. Often when we hear reputation management, we think perhaps it's public relations, it's marketing, and yes, those are very important aspects, the brand side of things. But you can brand and market and spend as much money as you want to on your external communication. If you don't have your foundation, your building blocks in place, you're going to waste so much money and so much time. My personal opinion is that PR hasn't PR'd itself particularly well. Because when we hear public relations, some people might automatically assume spin doctoring and thinking let's just cover this up. But it's all about building that reputation and getting the right communication out there. It's building businesses that you want to do business with. And I think that's absolutely crucial, especially in the supply chain management field that you're in. You want to do business with business that you trust, that have integrity. And it shouldn't just be something that you consider when there's a crisis. When we look at a crisis, it's very much reactive. The pawpaw has hit the fan, and now you have to clean it up. And are you going to get all those pieces cleaned up effectively? Whereas with reputation management, you have to build it. Even if you think everything is fine, how do you know everything is fine? If you proactively build it, you will be a lot more healthier in the long run. And I'll take you through another little exercise there. And it's not just about social media. I think there's also a big confusion out there. A lot of people, I wish I could have R1 for every person that has contacted me and said, please, can you take me off the Google? Now, unfortunately, that's not how the Google works. It's not going to get fixed with public relations or a press release. You have to have a strategy behind how you're going to build your reputation. And if you're on the Google for all the wrong reasons and you think it's going to be fixed by taking you off there, that's putting a plaster over a wound that you have no idea what the problem is. You have to dig deeper to see what those issues are. I found this quote from a Weber Shandwick study that was done in 2020. And it just shows the importance that research is starting to play. So I'll quickly read it. Corporate reputation is an invaluable asset with an appreciable impact on the company's bottom line. On average, global executives attribute 63% of their company's market value to their company's overall reputation. Also notes that reputation matters to the boards and directors, where if you take a couple of years back, reputation and communication was something fobbed off to the PR lady or the marketing team, please just sort this out. I must admit, a couple of years back, a large organization did approach us that went through some very interesting dealings in our South African history and said, please, we need to sort this out. We have a bit of a reputational issue. We don't worry about the marketing budget. Your budget is limitless. And I said, well, no amount of money is going to repair your reputation if you don't have your fundamentals in place. Thank you, but no thank you. So how fit is your reputation? So I often like to compare being reputation fit to being physically fit. So who of you runs or cycles or has a set gym routine? Is that a question, or are you confident? Run. Perfect. Right. So I'm going to use the running example because I also run. I move forward, not fast, but I move in a forward direction. So when you start running, you have to, when you feel physically fit and healthy, you start feeling a lot better about yourself. You'll also start associating with people that run or have a more healthy lifestyle. If you're going to be spending time with people that stay out until 3, 4 o'clock at night at the local pub, you're going to do that. You're not going to feel very fresh if you have to go for a long run. So the comparisons between being physically fit and being reputationally fit, first and foremost, like attract like. So as I said, you're either going to join a running club, you're going to get somebody that can run with you, cycle with you, that shares similar values with you. Same with the reputation. Like attracts like. People want to do business that they like and trust and want to do business with. They will spend their hard-earned money on your product or service if they resonate with what you have to offer. There's no quick fix, unfortunately. I wish I would be so much fitter if I ran around the block once a month, perhaps, maybe. But you have to consistently put in the exercise. And the same with the reputation. Sending out one media release isn't going to fix it. There's no quick solution. You have to build it. You have to build that stamina. It doesn't mean that you're never going to hurt yourself if you are fit or get ill. But you're going to recuperate a lot quicker than if you are not healthy. People who aren't as healthy are going to take longer. The same with the reputation. If you've built your reputation consistently and you have a good, solid reputation, and something happens, then people will remember that you have done a lot to build your reputation, and they will give you the benefit of the doubt. If something happens and they've never heard of you, they're going to make their own assumptions. So you have to get your message, your consistent message out there. You need to measure your progress. How do you know that you're fit? Does it mean running a park run without absolutely collapsing? Or does it mean an ultramarathon within a certain amount of time? So you have to measure it. And the same with your reputation. How do you know you have a good reputation? How are you measuring what your stakeholders and the people that you work with think of you? What is the perception out there? And then maintenance. You have to keep going. Again, you can't just do a once-off. You have to keep it going. And you have to have balance in everything that you do. As much as you want to just run, you have to alternate it with other exercise as well. And the same with reputation. You can't just focus on the communication side of things. You have to focus on the whole aspect of your business. Every single part of your business, every single person contributes to your reputation. So I'm going to go through a quick exercise. If you reflect on your company's reputation, so it could be either your own company or a company that you work for, you've got pieces of paper. If you just in general think, what is your organization's reputation? Give yourself a percentage. You don't have to give it, you don't have to say it out too loudly, but just write it down there. I'm going to do a lot of more writing very shortly. Just humor me with this. So write down a percentage. And then we'll get back to that. Right, so what is impacting your reputation? The following 10 building blocks is what we use when we measure or manage a reputation. These are the key things that we look at. So on your piece of paper, write down 1 to 10. And then you're going to give yourselves a score out of 10 for each of those building blocks. So ultimately, at the end, you're going to have 10 numbers that you're going to add up, and that's going to give you your reputation percentage. So the very first thing when we start building a reputation, when you start considering your reputation, the very, very first fundamental building block is the management side of things. It's your strategic intent. What is the purpose of your organization? What do you have a clear vision? I know that's an incredibly boring business jargon, but if you aren't clear where you are going, that's going to reflect in what you communicate to others. But even more crucially than having a vision, if there's one thing that needs to be incredibly clear and articulated, are your company's values. Because that is what needs to be communicated internally, externally, through behaviors, through activities, what you say, when you think, to the external world. That's also going to drive, very interestingly, your internal climate, your morale of your employees. It's going to encourage you who you want to do business with. You're not going to want to do business with an organization that doesn't have integrity, that isn't aligned with your ethics and your values. So if anything, values are absolutely crucial to build your reputation. So if you think about the values of your organization, if you are woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning after using many expletives, would you be able to rattle off the values of your company? Would you easily be able to say what they are? So give yourselves a score out of 10 for how articulate you are with the values of your company. I actually do a very I went through quite an exercise with my own team on values. I didn't want to just come up with wonderful words at the strategy session and then review them again in a year's time. That's not, and have it on our website and no one looks at it. So it's actually become part of our Monday morning meetings. We have values as a part of our agenda. What resonated or didn't resonate with our values during this week, and we share stories so that it's top of mind with the team the whole time. And it also just helps to make decisions of who we want to do business with, who we want on our team, so much easier. And we've seen people that don't align to our businesses. It's a nightmare to try and then work with them. So that's number one. That's number one on your list. The second part on your list, as part of this specific building block, is the governance side of things. So here we look at the policies, the procedures, how we do things around here. Because ultimately, a reputation is built on consistency. You're going to be either consistently good, which is going to build you a good, strong reputation, or if you're consistently inconsistent, that's also going to build your reputation, but not necessarily the reputation that you would like. So is your standard, your SOPs, your manuals, your step-by-steps, the way that you do things around here, are they up to date and are they easily accessible? So give yourselves a score out of 10 for that. Just out of interest as well, what we also measure under this block, but I won't ask you to rate this right here unless you want to, but then you'll just have to do the maths at the end, is leadership. Forms a really crucial part of your governance side of things because they have to lead by example. And very often, what's quite interesting is when people say, for example, or leaders say, I tweet in my personal capacity. Tweets don't reflect an endorsement. They do. It really does. And you can't just have a set of values at home different to a set of values at work. That's very unauthentic if you do. So you need to make sure that your values are aligned in everything that you do. If they're not, you're not at the right organization. It's not the place for you. You're going to butt heads. It's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be a nightmare for everyone. The next building block that we have a look at would be your teams, the internal stakeholders, your employees, because that's also where your reputation starts. They go home and they tell their family and friends how much they absolutely love going to work or how much they absolutely hate, cannot wait for the weekend, despise their work. And which one do you want to be your brand ambassador? So part of that is making sure that you have the right people doing the right work in the right way. Do they resonate with your values? So, and do you have a recruitment process to make sure that you have the right people doing the right work in the right way? So give yourselves a score out of 10 for the people that represent your organization, your colleagues that you work with. And it's all good and well to have a really, really good team, talented team. But if we're not going to enable them to grow and to be on a path of their own development with the right tools and mentorship and training, things are going to fall apart and you're not going to hold on to them for very long. So what is that growth path, that career development at your organization? Out of 10, what would you score yourselves there? So that should be the fourth on your list of 1 to 10. The next item to look at are the finances. Now, when we look at and measure financial side of things, to be very, very clear, we are not auditors. We do not want to look at the income statement, the balance sheet. There's very specialized organizations that do that. What we are interested in are the perceptions. What is the perception that an organization, that your stakeholders have of how sustainable you are in terms of, are you running a sustainable organization in terms of, will you see this year through? Are you profitable? So part of that is, what is it that makes you unique? Why are people going to spend their hard-earned cash on your specific products or services? And if I had to ask you, I won't put anybody on the spot, if you have to explain in 8 words, if you quickly had to write down in 8 words your unique selling proposition, would you be able to write it down really quickly? And if you're sitting next to a colleague that's at the same company as you, would they have exactly the same 8 words? Because that is also part of what needs to be communicated. I did quite an interesting exercise a number of years back. When I started Reputation Matters, I started in 2005, so we are now fully fledged teenagers. We did start off as public relations and event management, but I really very, very quickly realized that it wasn't as strategic as I had thought it would be. And that's why I developed a tool called the Repudometer that scientifically measures a reputation. So we can speak and present numbers around the boardroom table. And to transition from public relations to research was quite an interesting journey. And I thought, and I mean, I do a lot of communication telepathically, which people don't always get. So I thought I had done a really sterling job on communicating this to the team. And I asked them, send me a voice note of our unique selling proposition of what it is that we do. A majority of the team, sadly, had said that we're still a PR company. And that really helped me then to gauge, okay, I need to do something quite drastically with my communication. So it does help just to ask people. It doesn't have to be an expensive research exercise. Send a voice note. Use very basic tools to understand what the perceptions are out there. So what is your unique selling proposition? Can you quickly and articulately write down a sentence of 8 words or less of what your unique selling proposition is? Give yourselves a score out of 10 for how quickly you are able to do that. Then we look at the pricing. So in terms of the value that you add, why will people pay a premium price for a product? Or who's your market and are they willing to pay your prices and why? So have you put some thought into that pricing? This is also something very specific when we do work with listed companies. Obviously, there's a very big focus on that. So give yourselves a score from a pricing point of view and what your perception would be around that. Then the fourth building block. So at this stage, you would have 6 numbers listed. So the fourth building block, where are you positioned? And I think this is also absolutely crucial when it comes to the supply chain management side of things. First and foremost, who are you aligning with? Who are your suppliers and partners? Are you aligning to the people that you are working with in terms of values? Are you resonating with the values? Because if your partners, the suppliers, the people that you're associating with, stuff up your reputation and your brand will be stuffed up as well. That's why we see when companies invest in sports stars who do really questionable things, how quickly those sponsorships are pulled until things become right again. So are you sure that your suppliers and partners, do you have that due diligence in place to make sure that your partners and suppliers align with the vision to help you get where you need to get and are aligned to your values? Or you just hope and praying that everything works out? As sometimes we do, if we don't have the right recruitment process in place, we hope and pray we've got the right people in place. So give yourselves a score out of 10 for your suppliers and partners. Then the eighth part of this building block is, are you sustainably giving back to the community in which you live and work? And very importantly, it's not about giving just for the sake of giving money and putting your mind at ease. It's making sure it's every person's, I believe, organization's responsibility to see how they can sustainably encourage and uplift the communities in which we work and live. It doesn't always have to be monetary. It can be education, it can be training, it can be providing internship. But what is important is that it aligns to your overall vision as well. And again, aligned to your values. So your CSI, your corporate social investment, is that aligned to what you are doing? But I also want to put in a little disclaimer or a little asterisk here, is to not do it just for the sake of it. And I remember during the lockdown, I was approached by a lot of people wanting handouts and wanting to loan money, up to a point that I actually spoke to a really good business friend of mine, and I asked her, what do you do in this scenario? Because I'm sure that she gets asked 100 times more than I do. And she also said, as they say on the aeroplanes, you need to make sure that you have your oxygen mask on yourself first. Before you can help others, make sure that you are actually stable and secure first. Because I think often we try and spread ourselves so thin and we feel this amount of guilt. But you're not going to help anybody if you don't help and look after yourself first, so that you can actually then empower somebody a lot even better. So if you look at your CSI, is it well thought through? So give yourselves a mark out of 10 for that. Then all of this doesn't work in isolation. It's not mutually exclusive. It's all glued together by communication. So we need to make sure that internally everybody is on the same page. This is our vision. These are our values. This is my growth path and how I'm developing myself. This is what makes us unique. This is why we do business with the people that we're doing business with, and this is how we're giving back. Once you have that foundation in place, so on that, give yourselves a score out of 10. How in place is that foundation? How articulate are your teams internally when it comes to this? Because that is what's being communicated and needs to be communicated externally. That needs to translate into your website, your social media, into your media articles. This will guide you of what you need to say to each of your different stakeholders, because different stakeholders will know different parts of your business, or there might be gaps. What do they need to hear from you? Where's that perception perhaps building or breaking down your reputation? So if you look at this, your external communication, how aligned is it to these fundamental foundation blocks if you have to give yourselves a score out of 10? So I'll give you a few minutes to calculate that. And if you are sitting here with a colleague, it would be interesting to then compare your results with each other as well. And then I also want to take you back to that original number that you wrote down. When I said, give yourselves a score out of 100, what does that score look like versus this score out of the 10 elements that you have given yourself? And now I'd love to open the floor and get any comments, feedback, questions. How did you score? What did you do well on? What didn't you do as well on? The floor is yours. There's a gentleman.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's absolutely great question here. The only question I've got is, which I was a bit confused, is where we're positioning this. So is this internally, externally, shareholders, because reputation, where? So it's hard for me to answer it in terms of everything, because internally, there might be a lot of unhappiness, but externally, our company looks phenomenal, and the shareholders are praising us. A great OHI score, but because we get measured if the score's not high. So I'm just trying to work it out. Where would we have positioned this? I came in a lot lower than I rated my company.
Perfect.
But if I'd rated from an external position, we're a Dutch company, we'd be 100%, 95%, but internally about 78. So just a question, where do you position this, if you can just help me, or is it just a mixture of everything together?
So ideally, you actually need to ask all your different stakeholder groups. So what we do is we encourage, when we do work with clients, to have at least three to five. Five's a good amount. So it could be government, media, customers, partners, and employees. We really highly encourage having employees because each one of them are going to have a different perception. And then we have a dashboard to show exactly this is what's building or breaking down your reputation. So yes, today's exercise is pretty much one view focused, but it is good to get everybody's perceptions. And that also drives you to understand, where do I start with building my reputation? Should I be focusing internally? Should I be worried about my customers? Because sometimes it can be so overwhelming that, if we come up with 105 different things that need to change, but that can be really, really daunting. So doing a research exercise can say, okay, well, these are actually the 3 priority areas that you have to look at first, and let's first target the unions, for argument's sake. So the suggestion is the closest stakeholders that you work with on a regular basis.
I have just one little bit of an issue here. One of these points that you raised is we recuperate a lot quicker. In South Africa, we really have a culture of your last deed. No, I'm fine. Can anybody else hear me?
No, they can't hear you.
Sorry, okay. In South Africa, I get the idea that we have a culture of you're only as good as your last deed. So you can be 20, 30, 50 times good, but do one thing wrong, okay, and you're out of it. You can't really fall back on what you did because you've done that one thing wrong. And if you look at the media, there's a lot of cases of that where businesses had the unfortunate incident of associating with somebody or something, and their reputation is totally shut because of that one incident. And it's not measured on the 20 or 30 things they've done previously. So I've got that. I just want to mention that.
Just to add to that, because I think it's a really important point. If you do hurt yourself or damage your reputation, it doesn't mean that you can never fix it. It will just take so much longer and so much money and time. Unfortunately, it's an expensive exercise, and in terms of time and then money to rectify it. And I think that's also then, it's always easier said than done afterwards, where your policies, procedures, your governance comes into play of who do you do business with. So yeah, it unfortunately does take a little bit longer in some instances. There.
I want to agree with what the previous speaker said. We're a public entity. And what we are finding in the course of this exercise is that they're not equally, all your elements are not equally weighted. As an example, we find that there are primary and secondary elements, if I can term it that way. And within our situation, not at the risk of mentioning the company, we find that, for example, the element around leadership and communication stands out above, most of the others. So I think the contribution we want to make is not to take for granted that some of those elements are, above. They are key elements in terms of them. They're not mutually integrated.
Just to add for your colleague, especially when it comes to social responsibility, we know we are very good, but then it doesn't compare with the other elements. There's imbalance. So can we survive with our social responsibility alone? No.
So just to add to that, I think it's a very important aspect that you say there, and I'm sure many people feel, shucks, but surely this element should weigh more. But for whom? For some stakeholders, the social responsibility is going to be absolutely crucial. For some, it's going to be the training and development. So we've actually developed it that it is equal. So if you found that, fine, you're doing particularly well, because if you're doing particularly well in one area, the question to ask yourself, what is being neglected? Because there has to be that balance. So somewhere perhaps something is being neglected or not being looked at, so that all of them should be scoring 10 out of 10. Easier said than done, but that also then helps you to identify what are the priority areas. Because sometimes CSI can be the easier way out. That's the easy thing. And what we've also seen, as soon as there's a crisis, and I kind of want to just, if you go through a crisis, don't think the next press release be on CSI. You need to fix your values. You have to fix your governance. CSI can only get you so far, and people are going to see through if you're not authentic about your CSI involvement as well.
Where does ease of communication of the company come? E.g., these big corporates here, house regulated, then you have a problem. You put the rule set, and now I'm explaining that you big company, you are outwardly phenomenal. But you just have to speak to a supervisor, it's actually impossible. But a big problem with it. You know, where does that go? Because that actually destroys the company. For me, I'm actually cancel my contracts. Just that's how frustrating. So, to me, that, where would you put that in?
The call center side of things.
Or just communication back to the company, addressing problems. You know, because that, you know, that's that ways to do crisis. A good crisis can actually do a lot for your company. You can handle it very well.
I'll leave your numbers if you want to go the crisis route. Sure.
So if sometimes when your problem is resolved, you actually feel, you know, a lot more respect for the company, the government is there.
Absolutely.
So where would that?
It would overlap, and that's why I said this isn't mutually exclusive elements. So it would be with having the right person doing the right job in the right way, having the right training, and having the right policies and procedures in place as well. And I think often there's just too much red tape. There's just too little internal communication with stuff like that as well, which I think can be solved so much easier. So it's also not trying to I can't think of the word. Over-engineer, absolutely. Things step by steps are important, but up to a certain start. So that's where that would need to link in. But it actually also starts, and it has to start with the leadership realizing we have an issue. We need to do something here, because employees can say, you know, there's a massive issue, but if you don't have buy-in from leadership to fix a reputation, that's also going to absolutely, you know, everybody can do everything right, but people are looking at the leaders of how things need to be done. There's another question.
Context in which we find ourselves. I think that also comes into play to some extent. I'm trying to think about an example. You find that as a result of the context and the impact, and because this is about supply chain management, you know, issues around governance, and yes, all the issues that comes up, you also find that now because of the, you know, the legislative context or the regulation, you know, the highly regulated environment we find ourselves in, you find this culture of fear that descends upon employees, and you don't get the best of them. So then, you know, terms such as innovation then becomes a rhetoric at the end of the day, and people are stifled because they are unable then, to become innovative and bring in new ideas because of this culture of fear. So all I'm saying in terms of the diagram, maybe there should be arrows that also speaks to context or the environment. Thanks.
I think just to add to that, I think it's a very valuable insight there. And in my opinion, I think the whole tender process's reputation has been shot over the years. So at this stage, it's just rebuilding that trust. So that is going to be re-engineered for a while. You're not going to be allowed to see any innovation for now. You need to follow the rules because you have to show consistency. You have to be consistently consistent, because it's through that inconsistency, through being very creative and innovative with some of the tender processes in the past, I think people have lost trust in the whole process. So unfortunately, I think that is just the current scenario of it is going to take some while to rebuild the trust in that, and it is just having to deal with that for now. So that's, as I say, that's my opinion, and it is going to take some time to rebuild. Any thoughts on that? Am I totally off course with that?
Thank you so much.